Fans felt that Star Trek was a story about working together and exploring the world for many years. However, William Shatner is finally exposing the mayhem that has been going on behind the scenes. Not only were fistfights, sabotage, and feuds a part of the storyline, but they really happened. What was taking place was on the set. Why was it that a single classic scene came so close to causing the actors to leave? The question is, what were the covert choices that made Shatner the most reviled individual on the set? Stay with us because this is not the Star Trek story you were exposed to while you were growing up. The city of Montreal was the birthplace of William Shatner. This date is March 22, 1931 in Canada. His birth itself was a momentous occasion. During that time period, Montreal was buried under a snowstorm that broke all previous records. Due to the poor condition of the roads, his mother was forced to give birth at home. The beginning of his existence seemed to be predetermined to begin with a significant narrative. It was clear that Shatner had a passion for performing from a very young age. His enrollment in an acting school that was directed by a well-known Canadian actress began when he was only 8 years old. He was already performing in a professional manner by the time he was 10 years old. CBC's The Magic Flute was the first radio program in which he appeared as a performer. After a couple of years, he appeared in a production of Tom Sawyer at a local theater and earned a lot of positive feedback for his performance. He was said to have a theatrical presence that was significantly older than his age. In 1950, he produced a student play that went on to become a big success, and he even acted in it. Even the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation (CBC), where Shatner made his debut appearance on television, took notice of it. At the beginning of the year 1956, Shatner made the decision to go to New York City in order to pursue acting on a full-time basis. When he was cast in the part of Tamburlaine, the Great in the Broadway show, he was presented with his first significant opportunity. The show was only able to run for 20 performances before it was shut down. To be sure, for a young actor who has not received any professional instruction, it was a significant advance in time. Beginning in the late 1950s and continuing until the early 1960s, Shatner began his career in television after leaving Broadway. He might be found about. His schedule was packed with a variety of shows, including Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Defenders, and The Outer Limits. Nevertheless, The Twilight Zone was the one that stuck out. In the 1960 film Nick of Time, he played the role of a man who was madly in love with a fortune-telling machine. Next, in 1963, he had a starring role in the film Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, in which he played the role of a guy who was startled by a bizarre creature that was perched on the wing of an airplane. Through these roles, Shatner demonstrated his talent for portraying characters who were on the verge of panicking. A very different path led Shatner to the brink of becoming a television star in the year 1963. As the well-known conqueror, he performed the role of Alexander the Great in the pilot episode of the television show Alexander the Great. Another member of the cast was Adam West, who would go on to become Batman in the future. The focus of the pilot was on the Battle of Issus, which depicted Alexander the Great, played by Shatner, leading his army in battle against the Persians. Nevertheless, the network made the decision not to sign the show. Moreover, the pilot was not made available to the public as a television movie until the year 1968. If the show had continued, Shatner's career could have gone in a very other direction, one that might not have even led to Star Trek in the first place. Although William Shatner was given the part of Captain Kirk in 1966, he had to overcome a number of obstacles to reach that point. A separate captain was in charge of Star Trek at the beginning. In the first pilot episode, titled The Cage, Jeffrey Hunter played the role of Captain Pike. The pilot was turned down by NBC, who stated that it was too academic and too slow. However, rather than canceling the performance, they chose to do something that was not typical. It was requested that a second pilot with a new lead be created. In this manner, Shatner was given the opportunity. Shatner was in New York at the time, devoting his time to the completion of other projects. He received a call to watch the pilot that had been rejected. The quality of it was satisfactory to him, but he thought the actors were acting too serious. Soon after that, Hunter made the decision to not come back. Officially, it was due to the fact that he desired to concentrate on filmmaking. Shatner, however, made a veiled reference to the possibility that there was more to the story. Regardless of the reality, the position of captain was left vacant at this point. In order to fill the void, Shatner stepped in. And Shatner was well aware that he needed to make Captain Kirk stand out. His goal was for Kirk to experience a sense of surprise and curiosity, as if he were someone who was genuinely enthusiastic about venturing into the unknown. In the same vein, he desired for Kirk to have a personable personality, much like a laid-back captain on a ship. When he thought of Kirk, he pictured someone who could say something like, "Hey George, turn left," rather than giving directives that were stiff and professional. The audience was able to feel more connected to Kirk on a personal level as a result of his combination of self-assurance and approachability. Two different people served as sources of motivation for Shatner as he crafted the character of Kirk. An example of this is the well-known naval character Horatio Hornblower, who was renowned for his daring and brilliance. Alexander the Great was the other major figure. 2 years prior, Shatner had portrayed the role of Alexander in a television show, and he brought some of that intensity to take on the role of Kirk. Additionally, Shatner contributed to the comedic aspects of Kirk. He had the impression that the initial pilot was too heavy, and he desired to make things lighter. Because of this comedy, Kirk gained greater depth. But he was more than just a committed skipper. Someone who was capable of laughing was him. Entertain his workers with jokes and establish a personal connection with them. Due to the fact that he possessed both comedy and strength, Kirk became a character whom people enjoyed watching. In one of the early episodes, Shatner's acting was put to the test. The personality of Kirk was divided into two distinct sides. There is one wicked person. It was necessary for Shatner to represent all sides of Kirk, and he did so in a manner that exemplified the multifaceted nature of the character. During the course of this episode, an unexpected occurrence took place. Nimoy was the one who came up with the Vulcan neck pinch, which went on to become one of Spock's most recognizable moves. Furthermore, this was not the only creative effort made by the cast. Both William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy frequently collaborated on the rewriting of screenplays, which resulted in both creative magic and significant challenges. Between the years 1967 and 1967, during the production of The Trouble with Tribble, they spent 14 hours in a row changing dialogue, particularly for Kirk and Spock. The fact that the words of other characters were omitted caused David Gerrold, the writer of the show, to feel frustrated. By the third season, the rest of the cast began to jokingly refer to the show as the Shatner-Nimoy Show because their frequent rewriting had become so commonplace within the show. At times, however, it was not a joke. During the production of The Paradise Syndrome, which took place on March 8, 1968, they engaged in a furious argument with the director. Nimoy believed that the moment in which Kirk experiences memory loss ought to be more subdued, whereas Shatner wanted it to be dramatic and passionate. Until the producer Gene Roddenberry intervened and brought things under control. The altercation caused the production to be delayed for several hours. As a result of these kinds of conflicts, it became clear how much their rewrites impacted everyone working on set. It wasn't just the writers and filmmakers who were irritated by Shatner's actions. There were also instances in which it produced problems with the cast. One of the most notorious incidents took place on September 15th, 1966, while the film The Man Trap was being filmed. As a result of Shatner's perception that Nimoy was receiving an excessive amount of attention, he repeatedly went into Nimoy's camera shots, a total of 17 times. This resulted in retakes being necessary and produced such a high level of stress that Nimoy threatened to leave the set if it did not cease. Plato's Stepchildren, which was released in 1968, became another significant event. This contained a revolutionary kiss between Uhura and Kirk, who were made of different races. Shatner was concerned about the response of the audience, so he requested that a version of the film be filmed in which the kiss did not take place. Nevertheless, Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, was of the opinion that the kiss was significant. She and Shatner messed up every take that did not include the kiss, in order to ensure that the producers would not be able to use the version that did not include the kiss. As a result, the studio had no choice but to utilize the actual version. It was a moment that would go down in television history. The production of Star Trek was challenging for everyone involved. In several cases, the days lasted for 16 hours or longer. The episode of The Doomsday Machine, which was produced in 1967, was the most exhausting example because the actors and crew worked nonstop for 22 hours in order to complete it. According to his routine, Shatner would begin his day at 5:30 a.m. to apply his makeup, and he would not depart until after midnight. It was eventually the lengthy hours that wore him down. When I was working on the Thulian Web on October 3, 1968, I came across. After working on set for 18 hours, Shatner experienced a breakdown. His script was thrown out the window, and he refused to continue unless he was given a break. Despite the fact that this resulted in a new rule that mandated break periods, the rigorous schedule never actually built up to it. Shatner's personal life suffered a significant setback as a result of all of this employment. While he was working on Star Trek, his first marriage to Gloria Rand ended in divorce. In an interview in 2018, Shatner acknowledged that he had missed 217 family dinners over the course of 3 years. In 1967, he went so far as to forego Christmas Day in order to film reshoots for the Gamesters of Triskelion Company. As a result of yet another rewrite session with Nimoy, Gloria increased her level of frustration, particularly after he was unable to attend the school play that their daughter Elizabeth was performing in on April 12, 1968. The divorce petition was submitted by Gloria in June 1969, not long after the conclusion of the program. She stated that the emotional distance and constant absences from her husband were too much for her to bear. In a later statement, Shatner expressed his sadness at having missed so much time with his family. This includes spending 47 weekends with his children throughout the course of those days. In 1969, when Star Trek came to an end, William Shatner's life underwent a radical transformation. In spite of the fact that the show had a small but devoted fan base, it was not sufficient to keep it going. The cancellation of the show made it difficult for Shatner to find work in the acting industry. Due to the fact that people were unable to portray him in any other character save that of Captain Kirk, it was extremely difficult for him to secure new parts. Before that, just a few years ago, it was said that he would become the next Marlon Brando, and he was considered a rising star. As of this moment, he was unemployed and confused of what he should do next. From the beginning of the 1970s onward, things continued to deteriorate. This meant that Shatner had little choice but to accept any and all roles that came his way, even if they were in low-budget pictures that were detrimental to his career. Big Bad Mama, The Devil's Reign, and Kingdom of the Spiders are just a few of the films in which he had an appearance. He was in need of financial assistance, but these were not the kinds of initiatives he desired to undertake. People started to view him as nothing more than a horror and science fiction performer, which made it much more difficult for him to break free of the typecasting that had been following him ever since Star Trek. Because he did not have a reliable source of income, he had a difficult time providing for his three daughters, who were residing in Beverly Hills with their mother. As a result of his severe financial situation, Shatner found himself living in a tent in the San Fernando Valley. After some time had passed, he referred to this phase of his life as just that period, since he found it extremely difficult to discuss. The once famous actor was now living on the streets and doing whatever he could to secure some financial support for himself. In order to make ends meet, Shatner accepted any job he could get his hands on, regardless of how embarrassing it was. For the sole purpose of earning a few money, he would make appearances at small parties or events. One Christmas, he was unable to purchase presents for his girls since he did not have the funds. As an alternative, he wrapped up things that he already possessed, such as his Star Trek phaser, and presented them to others as presents. Though it was a difficult and humiliating moment, Shatner never lost up on his dreams. Then, in 1979, everything underwent a revolution. A new cinematic adaptation of Star Trek was produced, and William Shatner reprised his role as Captain Kirk. When it was released, the picture had a budget of $35 million, making it one of the most costly films ever produced as of that time. Initially, Paramount had intended to produce a new Star Trek television show. However, when Star Wars became a huge success in 1977, they made the decision to instead produce a film adaptation of the franchise. Although Shatner was first hesitant to return, he eventually decided to do so after receiving a substantial salary and gaining some control over the screenplay. When he was 48 years old, he put in a lot of effort to be in shape, and he resulted in a loss of 25 pounds through rigorous exercise and diet. However, filming was not a simple process. Repeatedly, the script was altered. Scenarios were occasionally being shot on the same day as other scenes. In many instances, Shatner found himself in conflict with the authors and the director, as he advocated for ideas such as a scene in which Kirk performs a risky space leap. However, due to financial constraints and worries about safety, it was not possible to carry out. In spite of the difficulties, the launch of the film took place in December 1979, to the delight of the audience. Shatner's portrayal of Kirk was acclaimed for its ability to remain faithful to the character, while also displaying a greater level of maturity. It was a solid film that made $139 million worldwide, but it was not a smash hit by any stretch of the imagination. With the subsequent picture, things were different. Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II, was released in 1982. Despite having a smaller budget, it became a huge success, grossing $95.8 million and being recognized as one of the greatest in the series. Both of these accolades were received. There were 13 films in the Star Trek film franchise that were released between 1979 and 2016, making it a massive franchise. On the other hand, the influence of Star Trek was not limited to the selling of tickets. A number of phrases, such as "Beam me up, Scotty," and "Live long and prosper," were ingrained in individuals' daily lives. The series even inspired technology that is used in the real world, like as a competition to design a medical tricorder that is functional. Despite all of the success, however, there were times when things were problematic. The 1989 film Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, which Shatner directed, was one of the most difficulties that the franchise faced. As part of their search for God, he desired for the crew of the Enterprise to embark on a trip that was profound and significant. However, because the studio did not approve of his concept, he was forced to alter it. Several years later, Shatner stated that he was not prepared to take on such a significant undertaking. "I failed," he remarked to me. "When I think about it, I failed miserably." For decades, he was plagued by the memory of that failure. The issues with the movie began at an early stage. The epic conclusion that Shatner had envisioned was one in which enormous rock creatures emerged from the top of a mountain. Nevertheless, the cost of producing those creatures was prohibitive. It cost $250,000 for each of the monsters to have a suit. In addition, the budget did not allow for the production of 10 suits. Therefore, the scenario was shortened, and as a result, it ended up appearing unconvincing and cheap. In addition to this, the most renowned special effects studio, Industrial Light Magic, was unable to assist because they were preoccupied with other major motion pictures, such as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Despite the fact that Shatner had to engage a smaller team for the effects, the work that they produced did not live up to the standards that fans had anticipated from a Star Trek movie. The production of the film was especially challenging due to the conflicts that existed among the cast. Afterwards, George Takei stated that Shatner experienced feelings of insecurity due to the amount of attention that Leonard Nimoy's character, Spock, received. Shatner believed that he was being overshadowed by the fans' enthusiasm for Spock's secretive personality. As a result of these conflicts, it became more difficult for Shatner to maintain a balance between his roles as director and star of the film. There were certain instances in which he attempted to give other characters their moments, such as Uhura's fan dance and Scotty's escape sequence. Nevertheless, those instances were not sufficient to save the movie. It had a production cost of $33 million, but only managed to generate $63 million around the globe, which was a far cry from the success that was expected. William Shatner's career took an unexpected turn after the conclusion of his Star Trek role. The police drama T.J. Hooker, which he starred in, was released in 1982.